Okay, well then, yeah, 11.
Welcome back, everyone, to Wildcat Fanalytics number 11. Mike and I were trying to decide which number and when, and it doesn't even matter. I think the last time we met was pre-mountain or post-mountain.
Yeah,
And here we
we've
are
we've
coming
decided
back.
on 11.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's been a stretch of it's been a long stretch of time since we talked, and there's a really good reason. I won't go into super detail, but my wife had our youngest son, our second son, back in early December, which is awesome. And unfortunately, he got really ill a few weeks ago, and he's been in the hospital. But he's getting out this Friday, clean bill of health. Um, it was a really trying and scary time. And Jesse, I appreciate everything that you did to be there for me and during that period and help distract me a little bit with hoops. But thankfully, we're putting that behind us. God is good, you know. Yeah, so I've watched as much as I can, but part of why I love getting together with you on these calls is to hear your thoughts about how these games have been going, and gosh, has it been a roller coaster, right?
totally. Yeah, it's fun to make sense of things that are on a like slightly predictable trajectory, and this season has been anything but. I got someone knocking at my door and parked in the middle of the street. The
Go
the
for
the
it.
twists and turns just like never stop here. So
Never stop. Yeah,
if my dog barks, we'll see
yeah.
what happens.
And you know me, like I'm big on taking data and projecting and feeling pretty confident about
Mhm.
like passes and prologue, but you can usually clean out some stuff. And this has just been a really weird season. If I have to be reductive of why, I would say just roster continuity is difficult to overcome. It's hard for everybody. We have a lot of talent, and so we look really good maybe in the early season when everybody else is still figuring their stuff out. But I think roster continuity, you turn over two-thirds of your roster, and inject guys. One of those guys that you bring back is Colin Boswell, who is 18 years old. If you haven't heard, and inject him and be like, hey, you need to be a superstar in the starting lineup. Um, it's gonna, that's going to lead to a lot of variability. Um,
Yeah. I have a challenge to that, and I'm wondering, do we want to go straight there,
cool.
or do you want to summarize, kind of start back where we left off in the LA games and then work our way up, or do you
Let's
want to
work our way
start big
there.
picture? Yeah.
Let's work our way there.
That's a really nice overview. And sorry about that. That was really strange that someone stopped in the middle of the street and then knocked at our door. That doesn't happen. So
Yeah,
the universe is giving us some interesting signals about our podcast. So I also wanted to say thank you. Thank you. There have been so many people that have subscribed to this, which you and I never even had a thought about people
yeah,
subscribing or what that means. But I definitely have felt the tug of obligation toward
yeah,
the people who leave comments, and thank you all for doing that. And
100%.
we're gonna do what we can to get deeper into, Mike's got some fun synergy stuff at some point if life evens
Yeah,
out. But we're humans and parents and partners first and foremost, and our commitment on this experiment was always to uphold those things first. So really glad for you and Miles and everybody trending toward health, and
appreciate
glad
it.
to come back and do this. So
Yeah, glad to still be doing this.
totally. It's what a get, what a blessing, what a privilege this is to be able to talk basketball in the midst of everything that you've gone through and the world is going through. So I hear all sorts of opinions, as do you,
Hmm.
around this team and players, and we're gonna break it down. Let's go back and first sort of gently summarize each game. The last time we met was the LA before the LA series, and there's narrative about these games, but I also want to reflect on a couple numbers and then have you give your take. There's a narrative after yesterday about Keyshawn Johnson
Mm.
sort of like being ineffective for a month and a half. So I just want to, without refuting that, I want to say against USC, 33 minutes, he had 13 rebounds, 5 offensive, um, 2 assists, 10 points, and
Pretty good.
um, I would say qualitatively, pretty solid on the defensive end. Um, yeah. And just
Yeah.
overall numbers, we didn't shoot the ball well, 40% overall from the field. I think this was one of the games that really looked pretty sloppy, and we didn't
Yeah.
convert very well on easy opportunities. But again, rebounding continues to be something that's almost taken for granted with this team. It is like a historically good rebounding team. We out rebounded, excuse me, them by 9. We still had 18 assists. Boswell had 3. He had a steal. He had no turnovers, 11 points. Just, as we come into these individual player narratives.
Yeah, just a note on the rebounding, top
Yep.
10 in the country in offensive rebounding, top 10, top 5 in denying offensive rebounding opportunities. So,
That's so
it's,
elite. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And it's
that's
bulletproofing,
pretty nuts.
right?
Yeah, and
There's
people
a
will say, "Hey,
yeah,
it's the bunnies." It's not just the bunnies,
yeah,
guys.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
there's a lot of rebounding going on here.
So UCLA, well, so I'm just gonna give these two little overviews and then I
Yeah.
wonder what jumps out at you. So UCLA obviously was a bizarre game similar to Stanford. UCLA really
Two
knew how to
halves, yeah.
take advantage of the drop coverage, take advantage of general um our general coverage,
Hmm.
and hit a bunch of threes early and then sort of evened out. And hopefully we had some intensity in the second half and showed some fight. We out rebounded them by 7. Keshad had a little bit more of a pedestrian game. This was a game where he didn't play much. 23 minutes, 5 shots, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks, no turnovers. And we shot 42%. So a lot of missed opportunities. Love, I thought, similar to Stanford, he was 5 for 16. I think that's what he shot against Stanford.
Yeah, it's
Um,
brutal.
brutal.
Yeah,
But we only had 10 turnovers and we were able to gut it out. 6 for 26 from 3 stands out, 25 for 29 from the free throw line, which is, I think, a really strong segue into some important threads about this team. So I'd love to know just what your takeaways are from the LA series 3 weeks ago and some of those numbers or otherwise.
yeah. I didn't take a whole lot from that USC game just because of how kind of sloppy it was. But for us, we can winning a sloppy game is great. And honestly, our disappointment with our offense, and we still put up I think like 1.1 points per possession. That's still really good,
Yeah.
right? Like that isn't us being like unable to put the ball in the hoop. It's just it didn't look as pretty as it normally would. So but that was a USC team, missing some guys that we should have beaten, and we ended up beating them, and so you move past it. That UCLA game, our ability to put them into foul trouble, and UCLA is a pretty foul prone team.
Yeah.
So taking advantage of that, by attacking the rim and leaning into our strengths of really driving the ball, that's something that I think we saw last night in um, in that Stanford game of that second half of like how did we get productive in that second half? It felt like we just kind of took it to the rim instead of
Attack the rim.
yeah,
That is everything with this team on. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
and, and when I first heard that these guys, I heard the whispers on Wildcat Authority. As always, shout out wildcatauthority.com.
Yeah.
Is it even wildcatauthority.com? I type in 24/7.
It
I have no
is.
idea what the
Yeah.
actual
Yeah.
is. Okay, cool. Yeah, when I heard that these were the guys that we were going to go after, I just thought, wow, like how crazy of a change is this for a team that was last year such an elite 3-point shooting team, and that we really didn't have anybody except for Pella that was driving to the rim. To switch from that to being like, hey, actually, we're going to bring in a bunch of guys that really can't shoot the ball very well, but man, heck, they can get downhill. And so if that's the personnel that we have, like, yes, like lean into that. Definitely, like we should be trying to pick up fouls. We should be putting pressure on guys that in the paint, and so love to see that out of that UCLA game. I think we out toughed them via that.
Yep. Yep. Okay, let's go. I'm itching at some of these bigger narratives. Let's just run through this. I'm gonna be proud of myself not to get it down a rabbit hole. So Oregon State game, which I did not get to see live, and
I
was
did.
you did. You were having a blast somehow. You
I
had
was
a
having a blast.
you had an enlightened experience, whereas most Cats fans, I think, were white knuckling. But again,
Despondent.
yep,
Yeah.
I wanna touch on a few highlights. So again,
Hmm.
this narrative about Keshad. having some sort of nightmare January. 29 minutes, 7 out of 11, 4 of 5 from the line, 6 boards, 2 assists, 2 steals, 1 block, 18 points, 0 turnovers.
Yeah, probably our best player in that game.
Yeah. And that was
And
last week, by the way, people.
I thought, no, I've heard that he is off the team, right?
I,
He's a ghost.
the dude's a
Uh,
7 point lifetime scorer who hasn't,
yeah,
made a 3-pointer, and now he's shooting. Let me say, I got hoop math open. I think he's shooting 36% from three on the year.
yeah, and he's
Um,
shooting like
38,
40 some
sorry. He's shooting 38% from three.
because he's shooting 42 in conference. He's
Yep.
shooting 42% from three in conference. Like
69% at the rim.
it's mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's really
Based
good.
on who he was, right?
Based on who he was. He's
Yeah.
not Tubelis, and we're going to come back to that in a second because I have a little bit of a theory. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So let's just do the conference thing one more
Let's do
time.
yeah,
It's 10 points he's averaging in conference. It's a career high. He's 6 boards, 2 assists, a positive assist to turnover ratio.
totally. And
This
he's never been a good passer. That was like actually
right? No, you,
concerns.
you
Yeah,
wouldn't expect him to.
no,
Yeah, that was actually definitely one of the concerns, right? Where you're like,
for
hey, this
sure.
offense kind of requires you to be a good passer. Like, how's that
Yep,
going to work out? Um, yeah, and he's got like a 120 offensive rating on the season, 117 right now. I mean, it's just really good. I know part of that's being part of the system, but he is part of the system,
so
and it's working.
the other things that stand out to me, I thought Pella played really well. He had 17, 4 assists, 2 steals, 3 turnovers. But with his usage, I think
Pella-esque.
that's kind of like his ceiling. 5 boards. Caleb Love, 6 for 12, +9, +10 free throw attempts is really
Loved
solid.
it.
You can get
Yeah,
23 points on 12 shots for him. I mean, his performance in the on the Oregon trip was elite level scoring efficiency. He had 5 turnovers against OSU. But we only had 12 as a team. The bench only had one. The bench actually played pretty well. Krivas had four. He had 10 points on 7 shots, 4 boards
yeah,
in 16 minutes. And KJ and Jaden did their thing. I do want to say one thing about Boswell is obviously he's going to be a big point of focus here. And well deserved. He didn't score. I, I noticed a play in the replay
hmm
at the end of the game. Okay. I keep going back and forth on trying to be objective about how much of this is Arizona and how much of this is sort of off the bell curve performance. And
yeah,
the Oregon State game was, from the parts I saw, I told you that there was some like pretty good defense that I can live with, and shot
yeah,
making that was just it was just like if you're gonna hit a fadeaway contested 25-footer with a hand in your face, there's not much anybody can do. Houston might blitz you and give up, try to go for a steal on the roller or something. But
yeah,
otherwise, the way we play, where we're sort of funneling and taking our odds on the percentages of long twos and threes, I thought we got out to shooters fairly well. And 12 out of 22, 12 out of 20 from three, you needed one, a ridiculous one, by the way, at the end that was a travel that was basically either going to get blocked or come out of the rafters and be an air ball, and it happened to be a swish, and they hit like 4 of those. But
yeah,
there's a play that I saw in the replay after I heard Boswell getting crushed for this game. He came back. He came back at the end of regulation. We are down 9, and I thought that showed some maturity in our team that we fought back
yeah,
and and we really made it a 50-50 game with 2 possessions left that it shouldn't have been. But Boswell was all over the ball handler. This is the play where the Oregon State ball handler fell and then somehow
hmm
rolled over on his stomach and didn't get a travel call.
yeah. I love that.
Somehow they got a timeout, but that was
Yeah,
a travel. If that
yeah,
is called correctly as a travel, Boswell gets all the credit for that. And he was all over this guy. Incredible
yeah,
on ball defense. His hands were there. That's what we saw last year with him. And I think when we get caught up in the narrative a little bit, even in these games where he's clearly struggling, including yesterday, his confidence is
hmm
clearly sort of like ungrounded. And we'll come back to this more. I have a take on it. Even in these moments, I am noticing that he comes up with positive plays.
yeah,
He had a couple really nice defensive plays second half against Stanford. Um, So I just want to come back to that. We can focus on, he's not making shots and he's got clearly confidence issues are hard to watch from a fan standpoint, especially from a point guard. We shot 3 for 14, and really the stats that matter were Oregon State shot 56%.
Yeah,
Bilodeau was 8 for 10, 3 for 4. It's Sam Decker-esque.
yeah,
Pope is obviously like an emerging high level shooter
yeah.
or ISO guy, and he had a career game and 5 assists. Um, and they still needed every one of those shots to beat us, which again, I'm not looking for a silver lining here. You can't lose that game.
Right.
Um, but we didn't
Yeah.
collapse like we did against Stanford.
Yeah, and I don't want to similar. I don't want to give like a hey, this is fine. It's not fine.
It's
You
not
gotta you
fine.
gotta find a you gotta find a way to win that game. Kylan, you gotta find a way to score a point. KJ, you gotta find a way to score a point. Jaden maybe get more than 5 points and 2 assists out of the 21 minutes you're out there. The guys gotta be a little bit more productive, right? But
You got to disrupt them. I mean, like, sorry to interrupt. I would just say Arizona should never be shaky enough defensively that 80 points
right,
doesn't get it done. Like we've lost,
but
I think, 4 games this year where we scored over 80 points.
I
That should
thought
never happen.
I thought the defensive, and here's the reason why I was kind of chuckling during this game. Like, I thought our defensive effort was pretty darn good.
Totally.
Like I
Yeah.
thought Kylan like played like pretty darn well. Not scoring that sucks, but the rest of his game, like you noted, like I thought it was made like he people thought we were gonna have to bury the guy, and I thought in this game, despite you look at the box score, you go, oh, it's a bad game for him. I thought he really did turn the corner and start turning it back on, where it
I
was like,
did
okay,
too. Yeah.
that's our Kylan. Yeah,
Yep.
come on back, buddy.
Good energy, good
Um,
focus. Yep.
Totally. And I thought the entire team played with pretty darn good energy. It's in Corvallis in the middle of the night, that's not always an easy trip to take
Yeah.
and game to stay up, a game to stay up for. We had an 11-0 run at the end of that game to force it. Some goofy stuff happened that didn't go our way, but
Oh my gosh, a couple of those, like how many shooting fouls did
yeah,
we get against us with like one set? I saw Boswell had 2 very questionable calls against him where I
yeah,
thought the defense was actually pretty good. They had multiple three point 3-point shot attempts that were foul calls and either slightly over aggressive defense or just really bailout. But I was watching it and I was like, man, if I didn't know the outcome of this, because I was watching the replay,
yeah, yeah.
I think it was 74-68. No, no, that was when they hit 3 of them. I think it was 77-72, right? Because Love hit that 4-point play.
Hmm.
And then we come down and Johnson fouls Pope on a 3-point shot with like 1 second left. And I'm like,
Yeah,
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 there's no
yeah,
way I would think, and it's 80-71. And somehow, so there was some good resolve against all odds in that game.
yeah, yeah,
And it's not okay. But I agree. I think what we saw against Oregon, which again, I'm happy to be wrong. After Thursday, I really did kind of lose my faith, and I've also
yeah. You were
I was
You were
done.
shaky, man.
I was shaky.
I
I'm
felt like I
sorry.
needed to get us on the pod just so
You
I could
did.
give you a hug here. Like
I know.
it's gonna be all right, brother.
Well, I think I've got a little PTSD from being at Matthew Knight Arena in Eugene
Yeah,
twice
yeah.
and having them just blow our doors in. So,
Oh, it's been
um,
bad, yeah.
so
Historically.
ag again, Keshad against Oregon, 35 minutes, 3 for 4 from three. I thought great opportunistic spot up 3-point shooting. He had
Yeah.
four boards and assist, only 1 turnover, 2 blocks, 12 points. Probably needs to get on the boards a little more, but I think as a team, we did win the rebounding battle, although this one was
Yeah.
tight, 34-33.
Just barely. Yeah.
Um, yeah,
155 offensive rating out of him, right? I mean, that's just speaking to a guy that just takes what the offense is giving you
yeah,
or what the defense is giving you. And so that's great for him. 12 points.
yeah.
That's awesome.
On
So
five shots.
and Kylan, 14 points, 3 assists, 1 turnover, a couple steals.
Yep. Two
Um,
boards.
that,
He even got an offensive
that's
rebound.
yeah, that's like that's awesome. Like,
It's awesome.
if Kylan's putting up 14 points, like, that's amazing. So
Yep.
early to bury any of these guys or say that they're not performing.
Right. Let's keep going to that catches us up to this past weekend here. Cal, um, I loved a lot of what I saw there, but before we get into editorializing, let's just give the numbers because again, people are beating up Keyshawn. 27 minutes, 6 of 13, 2 of 4 from three, 5 boards, 2 assists, 15 points. Umar had 22 and 13.
That was awesome.
He really does. I think I'm
Read the
appreciating
Met.
more his understanding of how to position
Yeah.
is next level, and that's obviously 22 points on 8 shots. Free throws aside is pretty amazing.
Uh,
Boswell looked great. If he makes one of those threes, it probably the stat line looks even more impressive. But what I loved was
yeah.
four defensive rebounds, 5 assists. Um,
Yeah. I'll take
and
seven
yeah,
and five, with 4 boards.
totally.
That's
And
7,
if
5, and
it
4 out of my point guard.
and
Why
the
not?
big thing there, which I thought credit a lot to Keyshot and maybe a little bit to Pella, was we really smothered Tyson. And Tyson had
Yeah.
10 points on 14 shots
Yeah.
and 10 boards, 4 assists. So he did a good job, but I thought Keyshot was all over him.
Yeah, and then Jalen Cone as well. Like, let's not
Hmm.
forget that Jalen Cone in conference play has been a double figure scorer, right? And for Kylan to step up and contain him, and it wasn't just Kylan, but Kylan had that primary responsibility. Guy had 5 points, on 8 attempts.
Yep.
So that's us doing our job on defense, making their lives hell. You know, good stuff. You have to win. You have to beat Cal at home, but yeah, like they played. We played really really well, and I like this Cal roster a lot more than other people, or maybe they're just like the general numbers on them. Ton of
He's got
turnover for them.
he's got five. That's my challenge to you when you started saying like roster turnover. Look at some of these teams like Washington State and Cal, and
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
better. Washington State's a borderline tournament team, and they could be sitting there licking their wounds about how everybody's
hundred
poached their
percent.
guys, and
Yeah, hundred
instead
percent.
that and they got a guy who was, guy who was taking cancer treatment last year is running the
Yeah,
point, and he's
yeah,
better than anyone we have, or
yeah. It might be.
playing better.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
so all right, Stanford yesterday, one of the strangest games I've ever seen. Probably if you weren't a fan of Arizona, it might have been highly entertaining. Not sure what Keyshawn's status is physically. Obviously, he had something
yeah,
going on with his left shoulder. 17
yeah.
minutes didn't do a whole lot. The other guys, though, Ballo had 18 and 13 boards after looking almost unplayable in the first 10 minutes. Boswell hit those 2 early threes. He did have 2 boards, which I appreciated. 3 assists, 2 steals, a block, 2 turnovers. And Pella had 17 on 11 shots. He was you called him the alpha. Yeah.
I thought he was great. It
Yeah.
looked like in the second half we were like just basically like run the offense through Pella. He knew it and was like, yeah, like top of the key, give me the rock. Like, we're gonna run a high pick and roll. I'm gonna blow right by them, and he kept doing it. I also loved seeing Love as doing the pick and roll with Ballo, and we only did it. We only went to it twice, and I think it was only successful that one time for that insane alley monster jam where for people saying that,
How does Ballo finish that? But if you give him an unguarded 2-footer, he
dude,
just yeah,
dude was 15 feet in the air somehow, and
such
he can't,
finesse. Yeah.
and we think he can't jump, and it's like,
He's
yeah,
got
that was
lift.
nuts.
He's got
He
lift
really
one if you
does.
give him a three
Yeah,
step warm up, he's got lift. He can't his
yeah. It's when
flat-footed
he's under
lift
the
is not great, but yeah.
yeah, it's when he's under the basket that he really struggles, right? Um, yeah. So I'd like to see us involve that play more. I said it on the forum that I have a soft spot in my heart for the roll man. So I just love the pick and roll and how productive it is as an offensive set in basketball. And if you've got a roll man like we do, two of them, that have 7 foot something wingspans, and you've got, and we saw this last night, a guy like Caleb Love who can attract so much attention, right? I mean, on that lob, I think he had 3 defenders just like staring at him, and so it's just like
Yeah.
just kind of the second lob a little sloppy, so maybe need to work on that.
Yeah,
But
just a foot too far. I actually thought he
yeah,
saved it. And then Pella, of course, hit the three.
yeah,
That ball was saved, but that was just kind of the
yeah,
way of the game. But no, I'm with you. I mean, I think Caleb had 8 boards and 7 assists yesterday, and that
yeah.
it's really impressive. Even he was as bad yesterday as I've seen him all year, just in terms of his decision making. And
You hated it, yeah.
I hate my son and I were just like, oh God, what are you
He
doing?
made some really bad
Really bad
decisions on
decisions.
shots.
Yeah,
Yeah, where the stuff that you were like,
this is who he
okay,
is.
he'll yeah, okay, he'll go and get you 30 something at Oregon, but then he's gonna, you're gonna play Stanford at home and he's gonna start taking shots like 3 seconds into the shot clock for some
Yeah,
reason.
when like you're doing them a favor because
Oh yeah,
I was just calling for it. It seems like this team, whenever they can sort of click into whatever the action is that gets somebody going downhill, we're
yeah,
really good.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I don't know what the mechanism is of making that continuity a little more regular.
yeah.
But what I'm seeing is, and I'd love to bounce this off you. So my I have two theories here. One of my theories is that part of our variability slash instability is that Tommy's offense, for the first 2 years we've seen it, has had the benefit of an elite level four-man who can score in
Hmm.
multiple ways and from multiple positions. You know, Tubelis could face up from the free throw line and go by most fours.
Yeah,
He can do that little face up flip shot from 10 feet, which is extremely difficult.
so difficult.
It's amazing that he could make that and not
Yeah,
ever get like a standstill three, but
yeah.
he can do that. He can go around you. He can go over
To
smaller
the left.
fours. Yep, he can go
Yeah.
left. He could he would well, I mean you followed the metrics last year.
Yeah.
What was his efficiency with that free throw line jumper?
I don't know. I'd have to look it up, but I'm
He was
sure it was
good.
bonkers. It
Yeah,
was really
like
good.
you
Yeah.
couldn't zone us because he or Pella could be right there and just go high low. Um,
Yep.
you know, for all his
And
limit. Go ahead.
his high low passing was
And
elite.
his passing, right? So
Yeah.
I think what I've come my sort of working hypothesis is that Keshad is a response to everything Tubelis wasn't,
Right.
and there's a lot of like he's a little bit of what Tubelis was. Um, And I think what Tommy's still searching for is how does the system work when you don't really have that four-man who can score as easily? It takes the pressure off some of the guard action. Balo,
Yeah.
you know, and I think that's been exposed this year, though Balo's, you know, numbers end up being pretty good, essentially because he gets a lot of dunks and he works hard and he's getting free throws. Um, I think more pressure is on Balo because we don't really have that four-man
Right.
who can score with the back to the basket. He can score face up. He can score on the baseline. He can take you from the top of the key. I think Keshad can do some of that stuff, and that's where I showed that video last time. When he gets a post touch and he scores over someone, that's gold because he's giving you two Bellis plus
Yeah.
giving you Keshad.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm a little disheartened slash confused at why we're not working harder to establish that, or I don't know whether it's working harder or it's on Keshad to establish. He's not getting many touches. And I think what happens in our offense is when the pressure comes to the guards, um, it's just harder to score when you're trying to score on penetration. This is the Tommy's whole offense is built on layups, right? And getting
Yeah.
guys, you know, seals and so what are your thoughts on that theory of Keshad and how the offense feels a little bit less stable because you don't have that four man who can score so easily?
That's a really interesting theory. It certainly, I agree with the issue, right? It does seem like there, and I would point to continuity generally, but this is a more specific thread to pull on, and I think it's a good one. Um, you look back and you think about Gonzaga and who they had at the four. Um, you had Rui, you had Kyle Wilcher, you
Mm.
have Killian Tilly, Chris
Zach
Kurt,
Collins.
Zach Collins, like these are
Yeah.
exceptionally talented players, and especially Anton Watson, especially talented scorers. I guess you played Timmy at the four a little bit, and so to go from and then you do have that again, that kind of a guy in Tubelis, and then to shift to a Johnson who he's shown the ability to hit open shots. You know, like I don't want to downplay his offensive ability, but he's certainly not like that kind of like a primary guy. And so, yeah, I do agree that we are trying to just figure that out. Um, I think the I think it's unfortunate that we're this deep in the season that we're trying to figure it out. That kind of sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, I'm like dual edged about this. One, it is kind of a bummer to see, but two, it is really good to see you see Tommy making some adjustments or rolling with lineups that, you know, he had a 5-out lineup at one point. Who
Yeah.
was that against
That was Oregon.
UCLA or
No, because we
was
were
it
in foul
Oregon?
trouble against Oregon. He went Pella at the
Yeah,
5.
yeah, that's right. Which
Remember
is
that?
nuts, you
Which is
know?
nuts.
Yeah.
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 And they're
You know,
big too. They're really
Oregon's a
big.
big team.
Mhm.
And we executed that. I thought
Yeah.
it looked
We,
really good.
we hung in for a
Um,
few possessions at least. You couldn't play
yeah,
25 minutes with that lineup, but
no,
I think quickness, speed, and ball handling are really underrated when it comes to size. Yeah.
yeah, and then the cutting that we were able to do
Hmm.
puts a lot of pressure on defenses, and you can pick up some fouls and kind of level the foul
Hmm.
playing field that way.
Yep.
And then you know, last night going with, you know, a KJ and JB, you know, more minutes, you know, maybe than Johnson and Boswell. You know, people have been kind of clamoring for that or clamoring for, you know, make an adjustment. That's a massive adjustment. And, you know, that kind of change turns the tide of the game. Now, did he stick with it? No, you know, but we don't have to in order to get back into a game and to win a game. So the tinkering worried a little bit, you know, but I think, you know, it's good to see him doing it. How are guys going to find their roles without having that 4-man? I don't know. You know, hopefully Tommy is able to figure it out.
Yeah, and without knowing anything about the team or the guys, I think there's more opportunity in the games where I've seen recently. I thought
Yeah,
Keyshawn's done a nice job in the post. He's not Tubelis, obviously. He's not any of those Gonzaga guys you mentioned. I
yeah,
think you don't want. He's not a guy you can run too many decisions through. You know,
right.
I think if you leave him one decision, if you can get him in position to make one decision, pass or attack, then
Yeah,
I think he can be effective enough to rebalance the floor where our guards can get, straight line drives and Umar can get that little bit of space that he had
yeah,
last year. So I'd like to see them go more to it. And my last thing on Keyshot is I don't worry about him at all. I saw his body language yesterday. He was engaged at the
it's
end.
great.
The 50-year guy who's like basically didn't play the second half, and he's up
He's
there
like, I don't
like
need to be on the court.
he's
We
leading the
won.
cheer.
Yeah,
He's clapping for KJ, he's clapping for all those guys. So let's talk about I love I would love to get into some synergy level analysis of the continuity because that's an eye test thing that many Cat fans are noticing that there's just it looks a little sluggish, it looks a little mechanical, it looks a little bit more like slow and isolated this year than the normal continuity. So maybe we can take a look at that in a
yeah.
week where life gives us more space. But what's your assessment? Last time we met, I was going to say, what's your assessment of Boswell now? Because last time I was sort of saying this is the time to maybe try him off the bench because he had bounced back on his own and
Hmm.
therefore
Yeah, I agreed.
wouldn't in his 18-year-old brain doesn't necessarily link a lot of the 18-year-old thinking is like it's really not much more than A plus B equals C. And
Yeah,
so you want to be careful with a delicate, fragile guy because he's clearly pretty fragile right now. You don't want to have it be like well, I played bad, so I am punished. You don't want to pile that on
right.
top of already fragile. What's your take now at this point with sort of the weird kind of up and down that he's had? Because he was fantastic last Saturday, he looked like an all conference player, and
Yeah.
then yesterday looked, at times like completely lost.
Yeah, you know, Tommy has to be flexible with his minutes, I think, and just which he was. You know, and it's not like swapping in Jaden is just a flat out answer. Now, Jaden's going to give you a lot on the defensive end, and he's going to make some smart passes. And when Jaden hits his shot, when he figures out like where his shots are, and feels it naturally rather than like is doing the math on the floor,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know, then he's like then he can be kind of like the nearish the scorer that you can get out of Kylan, but it really is naturally inherently underneath whatever kind of fog is going on, is that guy. Like he will get you buckets. So swapping in Jaden, it doesn't like fix the Kylan not getting you buckets thing. But it can, you know, it can be effective if Kylan isn't actively engaged. And there were some games there where, you know, where it was like, oh, cardio Kylan kind of thing, where he's just he's just out there
I love
getting a
that.
jog in.
Yep.
Um, but you know, good to see that, you know, Bradley's minutes have been coming up a little bit. Kylan's minutes have been coming down.
KJ.
Um,
KJ played 26 minutes yesterday.
KJ clearly deserves those minutes.
Woo.
You know, his ability to drive, it's nuts. And you brought it up, I think pod 1 or 2 or whatever, like
That's
him gliding in and somehow being able to finish these buckets around the rim is
wow,
just
that
been
one
tremendous to
yesterday
see.
in the chest of Reno yesterday was
Yeah.
cool.
And you can't believe it, you know?
Look at so how for a freshman, how's 52.7 effective field goal, 60, he's hitting
Yeah.
65% of his shots at the rim.
It's
Um,
awesome.
he, I'm sorry, 65% of his shots are at the rim. He's hitting 58% of those.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
He doesn't do anything mid-range, which is super efficient at this point for his skill set.
Yeah.
And then he's up to 32% from three, which I'll take. He's getting those open ones, but his right over here, man, this is where I thought this team would eat this year. When you look at 53% foul rate, and he's a really good free throw shooter for a
Yeah.
freshman.
Yeah.
And then you look at Pella, of course, is just like he's a walking free throw attempt,
Yeah.
47% foul rate, and that's with a guy who gets more shot attempts. So that's actually pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Umar, of course, that's an
For
ongoing
better or worse.
ongoing battle. And to be fair, Kylan's up. He was in the high eights. I think I
Yeah.
noticed one of the most encouraging aspects of the game against Cal was Boswell got in the lane. He made a clear
Yes.
effort to get in the lane, and it's
Yeah.
starting to pay off. So he's up to 10% foul rate, and he shoots the ball well. I don't think this year he's going to be Caleb Love, but
hmm
you know, I think he can. Again, a lot of this is like if we were in 1991 and you assumed he was going to be here for 4 years, this would not be so stressful. You'd just be like, all right,
Yeah.
this is part of it. He's a sophomore. He's only a sophomore. He's
It's
growing. He's
okay. He's
learning.
a young sophomore.
He's still shooting 38% from three. That's pretty good.
Yeah, unfortunately, 32% during conference play from
Yep.
three.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I think that's what we've all been noticing. He
Yep.
just has to take those catch and shoot threes, man.
Yeah.
You know, you saw on the assisted percentage. We talked at the beginning of the year. I think maybe you asked me like, "Hey, where would you like to see assisted percentage for Kylan and Caleb?" And I was like, somewhere between like 75, 85 would be great. Usually that means that you're taking a fair amount of catch and shoot threes, which are just inherently a better shot than a dribble jumper. Caleb, 83%. He did it, you know, like that is
Well,
incredible. Like
but
he
that's also the percentage of made threes, right? So like you, what's
forget about
what's
that.
the percentage of unassisted misses is what we need to see.
Yeah, I was like, as I'm saying that, I'm like, wait a minute, like that math doesn't seem like that works given, you know, he takes about 50-50 between the two, I think.
Right. And that's but to your point, at least he's showing the efficiency on the assisted. Well, I mean, if the guy, I think I said it, I don't think it takes rocket science to see you can watch Caleb Love for 10 games and say if this guy actually shot premium threes like Pella, he'd
Yeah.
probably have the same percentage. But
Well,
that's
so
not me. Yeah.
he is shooting 37% in conference from three.
It's
Caleb is,
great.
which
It's
is
great.
insane.
It's
It's I
insane.
mean for what he, you know, for a guy that was never really over 30% last year, you know, to now be at 37% is fantastic. Pella 36%, Keyshot 42% in conference, KJ 43% in conference, Jaden 44% in conference. Now
Yeah.
those guys aren't taking a ton,
No.
but the efficiency is there. Yeah, I wonder about the balancing of this offense and how we best get our buckets and maybe just spreading out those responsibilities more to guys like KJ. You know, having Keyshawn take those open looks. You know, maybe that's a cure. I don't know.
I think if they're committed as a team to finding the roles that give the offense the best chance to
Hmm.
run efficiently, then I think
Yeah.
those answers are there. And so
Yeah.
if I'm trusting that there's no internal conflict around that, because everything
Hmm.
we hear is pretty positive with this chemistry, then I think they're working it out. And
Yeah, I think so too.
it's an off, maybe this is to your point at the beginning about continuity. Maybe there's something about an offense that gives so much decision making to the players that doesn't lend itself well to a plug and play, five new guys in eight-man rotation. But
Yeah.
it is February, and I thought a lot of this stuff looked good on the Middle East trip, where yes,
Right.
we were taking a lot of pull up threes, and that made me nervous. But we were also feeding Keyshot, and he was making a lot of plays. I think he was the leading scorer on that trip. He was hitting
Hmm.
turnarounds, he was getting to the basket, and people were like, "Oh my gosh, this kid's going to be the conference player of the year." And it's like he's not really involved in the continuity as much as it seems like he could be. Can I say a piece on Boswell?
Please.
Because I'm fascinated with, as you know, with this type of development, and this
Yeah.
clearly doesn't take a developmental minded person to see that Boswell's struggles are largely internal at this point.
Yeah.
And I had made the statement after the Colorado Utah weekend that he sort of had his bounce back. And I thought,
Hmm.
you know, at home against USC would have been a really good time to play with the lineup because he was a little more stable, it seemed. I don't know. I would say at this point, I wonder, this is my guess, this is my armchair guess here. I Watching that documentary that he made last year. Do you remember that? Did
Hmm.
you watch that,
Yeah.
Lois? Pretty cool.
Hmm. I did. Yeah.
Watching his goal setting.
Yeah.
I wonder if this is a classic example of goal setting that actually has created some real doubt and hindrance. I wonder if this kid, he's 17 when he makes these goals, maybe even 16 when he sets these goals. I remember his goal, I think his first year was to be Pac-12 Freshman of the Year. So here's a
Yeah.
17-year-old with a broken foot who says, I'm going to
Yeah.
be Pac-12 Freshman of the Year. That's great as long as not getting that. I always used to tell kids, you can set whatever external goals help you, but if they start to affect your relationship with the process elements, then they're not helpful. These kind of
Yeah.
external goals, right? There's very little of that is in his hands, whether he's the Pac-12. But anyway, his sophomore goal was, I want to be all Pac-12 and I want to be, I think, all American and first round NBA pick. He had these really lofty, these are all things that are 98% out of his hands.
Yeah.
I wonder if a little bit of what's happening is he got punched in the mouth psychologically in that, basically after Wisconsin against Purdue.
Hmm.
He was
Yeah.
shaky. We saw it. And I wonder if this is his moment where he's like, oh my gosh, I'm not as big a fish right now as I thought I'd be.
Yeah.
And all my goals are crumbling in my face. And now I don't know, I don't have any sort of organizational identity here because I'm 18 and I can't really understand things that aren't A plus B equals C. And even though he looks like a really sophisticated kid and he has the skills, he may be going through just this identity reorganization of what is it like to be to sort of like fall short of your goals and feel the humility
Yeah.
of that. And I have no idea, right? But I'm just guessing. I've seen it. I recruited a kid one time who was he was a good runner, but he wasn't
Yeah.
like a national level guy. And his goal as a junior in high school was to make an Olympic team. And we're always like, I love your audacity. He
Yeah.
never even made a varsity team at Portland. And he had a nice career, but it wasn't ever going to be a thing. And it was like he had to really readapt. Because I never want to tell somebody they can't do something, but at the same
Sure.
time, you have to like massage that to a point where they can focus on process elements of their development. And it feels like to me that Kylan is just kind of lost in that, not lost, but he's on a path where he's either going to get through it and sort of like find the humility and just reground himself and maybe let go of some of those external goals. Um, or he's gonna, like a lot of Cats fans fear, the sky's gonna fall and he's gonna, just fall, be benched or quit or whatever. But
I
I think you can't bench him now. I think the team rests in him getting through it. And it's not a like if we weren't in this time in the world where everything has to happen now, it
Yeah.
would be fine. It would be totally
Yeah.
fine. He'd come back as a junior, he would learn from this year, and he'd probably have a really good junior year. But that's not where we are. We all need a Final Four now, or else the sky is falling. And I feel like this kid's kind of wrapped up in that.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's the first thing that came to my mind when I was wondering, what's going on with Kylan, and you immediately think back to that list of goals that you saw and that they were completely audacious. I mean, like you said, congrats on setting difficult goals. You have to be able to be okay with not meeting those goals and having your own journey and having your own process and being proud of whatever that is. And so yeah, I deeply wonder if he's living under the weight of that
Yeah.
and that he doesn't have the breathing room right now to figure out because he's in the middle of a conference season. He's in the middle of this is still ongoing for him, right? It's not like
Yep.
he gets to take a break and look around and figure it out. Um, so yeah, I think he's living under the weight of all of that.
Yeah.
I feel for him.
I do too. Yeah.
It's not the end of the world
Right.
to have a tough season this year. Or it, I mean, gosh, it's not even that tough of a season. You're
Right.
still a darn good
Yeah.
player. So it's not the end of the world for him to just not be that a superstar essentially straight out of the gates as an 18-year-old. But he's going to have to probably figure that out somehow, come to terms with it before this gets kind of settled, before he settles in, right?
Yeah, totally. Settles in is a really
Um,
good way to say it. Yeah, because
yeah,
he's unsettled.
yeah, and I'd hope that he would have conversations, honest conversations with a guy like Caleb, who came into college thinking that he would be gone already, right? And who has had to deal with, hey, carrying the weight of expectations, internal, external, and not meeting them, and then what does life look like? And it's in life goes on, like you can continue to have fun playing basketball, you can continue to be a success. The one path that you set for yourself doesn't have to be the only path there.
Yeah.
So I would hope he's talking earnestly with him. I would think Rim, our young assistant development coach, whatever his title is. He's been around some great guards. Maybe he's got some insights for him. I imagine that the team, Tommy's that kind of guy and he said, previously, hey, we've told the team, you got to lift this kid up. You got to make sure. But yeah, he needs his mojo back, and part of that is getting settled. I need him taking those open threes. I need him hunting that shot. He is that guy. It's still him. And it's okay if he's back here next year with a great group of guys and he can go off to the NBA then.
I
It's
know.
okay.
Yeah. It's pretty cool to see that Tommy's set up that mentor program where each current player is
Yeah, yeah.
assigned an alumni. I can't remember who's Kylan's. Is it
It's a
TJ?
that's a great question. I wonder. I don't know.
God, it'd be really seems like it'd be really good to have him speak with someone like TJ or Jason
I think TJ,
Terry or yeah, 4 year guy,
Jason,
Damon. Yeah, Damon's
yeah,
coaching, but
David's coaching. Yeah.
I mean,
Great
he's
point.
it's I think for fans, I feel for as we talked about a few episodes ago, this is a traumatized program that has not
Yeah,
reached the Final Four in 23 years, and it feels like
yeah,
every year it doesn't happen, the pressure doubles to make it when
yeah,
it's really like,
yeah.
I was looking up basketball reference. Krzyzewski made made the tournament once in his first 4 years and
Wow.
had like three losing seasons. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, Tommy Lloyd's the winningest coach in his
Yeah,
first three seasons in the history of the game, and we're like, it's
yeah,
over. And
yeah,
Krzyzewski, I know again, different era, stuff does happen faster now. You can have plug and play, player development's a lot sharper earlier. But but also to your point at the beginning of the conversation today, Mike, that everybody's dealing with the same elements. So, even when I hear Casey Jacobson yesterday talk about Stanford and say, Stanford's so hard to prepare for, they've got all these sets. And I'm like, well, shoot, man. Didn't bother Santa Clara, didn't bother like all
yeah,
these teams that kicked their ass in the first half of the season. I mean, I know they didn't have Carlisle, but
yeah,
come on. I mean, you know,
yeah,
it's the same for everybody. So I'm kind of
yeah.
tired of the excuses.
but you see the road record for college basketball this year,
Mm,
and it's for top 10 teams, and it's really bad. It's historically off the like way off the charts, and I do think a lot of that has to do with the lack of roster continuity. Is
yeah.
among like Stanford, they do have one of the top roster continuities in the country. Now we should be able to beat them. Like what the heck? But
No, I think that
um,
my beef is more that why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they playing better against other teams? I think they
because
look great.
Stanford hates us in person. There's something, they're nerds, we're jocks,
Yeah.
something like that, man, because they want to murder our program every single time we take the court with them, and I don't like it.
I every time I look at their roster, I'm like, these guys are good. They should be an NCAA tournament team almost
Yeah,
every
it's
year.
stupid.
It's
Yeah.
really it's and then they play us and I'm like, yeah, exactly.
Oh,
This is
there
what
it
I
is.
expect. And then it's
Yeah.
like, what are they doing the rest of these games? I mean, they've we'll see. I mean, if the whole excuse is that they haven't been healthy, then when Carlisle comes back, then they should go on a tear and they should be a top four team in the league. They really should. I thought Reynaud 2 years ago, I thought he was an all
Yeah, you
conference
said it.
type player and he looks
Yeah.
really good. He looks
Yeah,
like
he
an
looks the
NBA
part.
prospect. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just don't know what they're doing on these other nights. But they certainly feel comfortable shooting threes against us. So good for them. And
Yeah.
I never want to play them again.
Never, ever, ever, ever.
Yes. Um, all right, let's bring this home.
Yeah.
What so full circle back to this. This is the big trip, right? That
Yeah.
you have a 1 game lead, a clean 1 game lead in the conference, headed into the toughest road trip on your schedule.
Yeah.
Utah and Colorado were combined 24-0 at home this year.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, what do you
Yeah.
think we're gonna take?
Yeah, I, we need to split this. We need to split. You can't get swept on the road, but the odds are, we're probably favored in each of these games by like a couple points. Utah, maybe we're favored by like 3 or 4. Colorado, I think it's probably going to depend upon health for them.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we need to. This is the part of the season I texted you previously about Tommy was his quote of like, "Hey, look, we're not preparing for January. Basically, we're preparing for March and April." Well,
All right.
we're kind of there, man. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you're in the deep part of that schedule now. You got 22 games under your belt. Like let's finish this thing off, kind
Yeah.
of thing, and really be kind of on the upswing as we head in. Because the stuff that's left, it's kind of easy stuff, right? The rest of the games, what what's our toughest last game? Washington State at home. They're pretty good.
Oh,
They're getting votes in
I
the
think
top 25.
the LA trip's gonna be dicey as heck.
Yeah, no, just because it's LA, just because it's those
But
teams that
UCLA
that
is
that
much improved, and USC is gonna have Collier, and you know
yeah. Um,
that
yeah. So
you're not worried
it's
about.
just
Hey, if you're not worried about it, I'll go with that.
it
ASU
just it
on the
just
road.
matters. Yeah, I mean these are just like emotion games for me.
Yeah.
I don't I think we should trounce those teams. Like, if the jerseys didn't say what they said, if the history wasn't the
Yeah.
history. But
Oregon at
also,
home.
yeah, Oregon at
They
home.
play well. They play well at McHale.
They do play well at McHale.
Yeah.
They're always the spoiler. Yeah, this is sort of the trendsetter for the rest of it's this, and then we have those last 4 games, but then we have these two. We have Arizona State, Washington State, Washington, Arizona, and then Arizona State again, and then we get to the Oregon, UCLA, USC,
Yeah.
and so I'd like to see us set the trend and
Yeah.
follow through. Um, yeah,
We could play really well against these teams and still get nipped. Like it it's okay. I think what I'd like to, yeah, sure, I'd love to win both. I'd love to win at least one, but it's not a percentage. Each game's individual. You could
yeah,
lose both and play pretty well. Especially if
yeah,
Colorado's at full strength. But what I'd like to see is just I'd like to see us play hard. I'd like to see us, compete, make easy shots when we get them. And I can say this because I'm not somebody who pedestalizes Lute Olson like a lot of Arizona fans. I was pretty critical of him in
hmm
certain ways. This is the type of weekend trip where Lute Olson would go in and sweep when everybody would be like, "Oh, Arizona's vulnerable. These teams are hungry," and then all of a sudden they're going to come in and they're going to execute, and you're like, "Dang, that is baller."
That would
Right?
warm my heart. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
that's what I'm looking for.
Right. But
Yeah.
I just don't see it. I haven't seen it yet. I
No.
think, I think if we played Colorado on Thursday and Utah on Saturday, because Colorado's the better team,
Yeah.
metrically speaking, I would
Hmm.
say we'd have a better chance at a sweep because we've been historically better in game one than game two. Um,
Hmm.
that being said, you pointed out last time how well Utah attacked us, and they scored 72 points with Carlson having probably, he would say, maybe his worst game of the season.
Yeah.
We worked Carlson when Keita went out. I think a big unsung part of that game was they lost Keita very early, and
Yeah.
he's the answer to Balo. And
Mm.
Balo destroyed Carlson. He just
Yeah.
buried him in the paint in the second
Yeah.
half and got what he wanted. I think that's going to go very differently this time. And I think again, I think we're going to have to address this offense issue immediately because I think they're going to neutralize the post with Keita. They're going to put Carlson on key shot and say, make us beat you with someone else. And I think we should attack.
Yeah.
I think Keyshot has more to give there, and I hope we attack and don't settle for long threes. Um, and I think we can beat Utah, but because they shot the ball pretty well, and really Madsen, knock on wood, shouldn't he probably will do what he did against us, but it'll look different. He'll probably
Yeah.
have the similar efficiency, maybe a shot better. Um, but they shot the ball pretty well in that game
Yeah.
outside of Carlson. Colorado, I don't see any way around us losing that game just because they're going to be full strength and they can almost be free because the game in Tucson was so ridiculous. They didn't have
Right.
Cody Williams with Arizona. There. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard to see us winning in Boulder, but that's my alma mater. So hopefully I am just I hate losing to Colorado because I saw what a joke the program was in the 90s. And so
Yeah.
it's hard to lose to Colorado for me. Unfortunately, we've done pretty well, but I don't know. I think they're probably in a good position to get us. So I think hopefully we put all our eggs in that Utah basket and then it's just gravy. And then maybe Saturday you play
Yeah.
loose enough that
Yeah.
maybe it's one of those
Look.
Caleb Love games where we shoot 10 for 20 from three and we can kind of outscore them.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. Where you
Yeah,
like, look, our goal is to win every game, but like our what we need is to split. And so if you're able to win Utah, and I think Utah is the tougher team to prepare for because they're so
totally.
well coached,
Totally.
and they have some really interesting components to their roster. I think Colorado is a little more simplistic.
Yep.
If you do a couple of things right on a couple of guys, that really takes away from their ability
Totally.
to work.
But
And Tad
they do
Boyle
have
is a
three
crappy
really,
coach.
yeah, they have three really high level guys though. If you
Totally.
if they're at full strength and KJ Simpson is your second or third priority, like that's problematic if you're trying to get if Boswell's not Boswell.
Yeah, totally.
You're going to see a
Yeah.
lot of Jaden Bradley and KJ Lewis in that game, and and then what happens to the offense, right? So
Hmm.
it's one of those weeks where we're just all hoping that we're waiting for the turn of the tide, and
Yeah.
I'm just not so sure that's the way this season goes.
It
Um,
hasn't been,
and it hasn't been, yeah.
but
So
it's okay.
yeah,
If we come away again, I'm waiting for March. I'm waiting for success in March. This whole thing with my family has given me a lot of perspective.
nice.
I'm not taking these losses like I used to. Um, this has been a choppy season. If we lose some more down the stretch, that should be expected. Just can we be the team that we need to be by the time March 15th or whatever rolls around, 22nd or whatever it is, then cool.
It's
That's the goal.
happens every year for a handful of teams. They
Yeah,
they have this arc, and we've just like rarely been that team, right?
yeah,
So it's like my first response is always like, yeah, that's not the Arizona way. The Arizona way is to like come out hard and
right.
and then sort
And
of fall
just
flat.
eat
Just
her.
like,
Yeah,
why are we in the NCAA tournament? I'd rather go to the
yeah.
Sizzler buffet. What are we doing? Well, I hope we get to meet next week and
Yeah,
in the aftermath of all this and
yeah,
just
yeah. We will.
good luck with everything you have going on
Thank you.
and Wildcat fans continue to bear down.
Bear down, baby.